Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome to the SBI Podcast, a weekly broadcast dedicated to helping you make your number by getting your peers to share with you how they are making theirs. Today we're going to demonstrate how to launch new products successfully. So why this topic? Product launches fail to generate revenue when salespeople and channel partners are not involved in the messaging development during the pre-launch preparations. When messaging is developed in isolation, sometimes it's not compelling enough to get your customers to act. Stories told directly to customers by well-trained sales channels enable customers and prospects to answer the critical question of why change? And this stimulates latent demand while leading to exceptional revenue growth. My name is Greg Alexander. I'm the CEO of SBI, and I'm also your host for today's show. And helping me today with our demonstration is a Chief Product and Strategy Officer who knows a few things about launching new products. His name is Toby Williams. Toby, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself to the audience.
Great. Thanks very much, Greg. Pleasure to be with you. I'm Toby Williams, Chief Product and Strategy Officer at Ellucian. And Ellucian is an ERP software company, vertical software company that covers the higher education software and solution space globally.
Okay, very good. So let's start kind of high level, if we will, and then we'll dive down into some details as we go. So opening question for you, if you could describe the launch process that you use there at Ellucian, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. This is actually one of my favorite topics. We're in the process of rebuilding the launch process and have made, I think, pretty good progress so far over the last 6 months or so. So just to give you a sense of what we go through, first of all, just launch defined for us. So we tend to define launch pretty broadly to really account for the full product life cycle from idea inception all the way through to market launch and then every step in between. I think importantly, it is a process. It's not sort of a one event happening. It's a process. It has many steps, and it involves both everything from idea inception, then product development, and then also everything all the way through the go-to-market motion. I think for us, there's a few key ingredients that we focus on in both developing and then executing the launch process. So for start, we have a strong project management office, and everything really centers around how we manage things as a project. So making sure that you have a project management office in place, certainly critical for us, that can partner with the product management team, and then also all the other functional areas that are involved in any launch. We've tried to get as much input as possible from all the cross-functional orgs in terms of defining a repeatable process. So one of the things that we've really spent a lot of time on is not just having the project management discipline, but also the repeatability of the process. And we have a fairly broad portfolio, and so for us, the ability to both launch products and then manage existing products through a repeatable process that we've got full buy-in from all the different functional areas has been really important to us. It's really a cornerstone of how we manage launch at Ellucian. And then, touching on the cross-functional nature, making sure that we've built the process with a ton of input from all the different contributors and stakeholders in the process, everyone from R&D to professional services to customer success to finance and marketing and sales and everyone else that has a role to play in building, delivering, supporting, or eventually selling the product. That's been a key for us to make sure that we're building in all of that feedback and building a process that includes all of the cross-functional teams. We tried to templatize as much as possible for our teams in the launch process, and that's everything from the actual process itself to the artifacts that go along with it, the milestones that we go through, and then also the teams themselves and how we organize the teams. We have product success teams that are constituted from each of the different functional areas and that work on and come together regularly with a regular meeting cadence to manage both the existing product set and any new launches that we have. And then, just from a big picture perspective, the big milestones in our process are things like, idea generation for a new product, business case building, again, in the new product context, the market research that we go through to identify and confirm market problems and the fact that we're actually, solving the market problems that we've identified, and then getting a ton of client feedback as well, and then, ending in from a new product perspective, at least in the early stages, investment approval, and then going forward to build proof of concepts to alpha products and services that the clients can start playing with. And then going through, beta and early adopters cycles so that we can do the appropriate client testing, get all that feedback, and making sure that we're actually coming to market with something that will both resonate with the market in terms of the market problems that we're solving, but also, be a great client experience from a full solution perspective. So for us, making sure that we're looking at not just did we build great software, but are we delivering a client experience that's best in class and that's a really pleasurable client experience for them from both the buying cycle to the implementation cycle, and then the continued use of the product.
Yeah. So just a great description, a great overview, and I know that's somewhat of an unfair question because it's a complicated process and this is a short podcast, but that gave our audience a good overview. Our firm, as you know, SBI is a management consulting firm, and our niche and our specialty is in B2B sales and marketing. So when we get involved in product launch, it's typically around the commercialization process. So my next set of questions will go towards that, specifically around messaging. So as a product leader, when you're developing messaging that defeats the status quo, and I really want to emphasize that term, the status quo, because very often in B2B, we need to stimulate latent demand to generate revenue, and do nothing, if you will, is the customer's default position. So we really have to compel them to change. So when you think about that task, developing messaging that defeats the status quo, over maybe the course of your entire career, what have you seen works, and kind of what's your approach there?
Yeah, it's both a great question, Greg, and it's one that we spend a lot of time thinking about from an Ellucian perspective. We're in a space where it's ERP product and solution focused, and with ERP products, as you and your listeners I'm sure know, these tend to be longer buying cycles. They tend to be long tenured once you have sold and implemented an ERP system, and the dollars are most times significant. So generating that activity in terms of actually getting folks to the line to take on the solutions is a significant task, significant cycle for our go-to-market teams. So in my mind, approaching the conversation in terms of how to defeat the status quo and developing the right messaging around that really starts with thinking about market problems. So, for us, thinking through either a new solution or an existing solution, it starts with focusing on what are the critical or significant market problems that the solution is solving, and all that through the customer lens. And, a lot of how we approach the business is really focused on, what is the problem we're solving for the customer, and doing that with a real view from the client's seat. If you've focused a product or a solution on a significant market problem that clients face, then it stands a solid chance of delivering a real substantial ROI to customers. Likewise, really understanding the buyer persona and the use case or the context around how the buyer and or user persona will actually use the solution will help inform how to talk about the solution. And then ease of adoption, I think, is also critical, both in terms of the actual ease of client adoption, and then being able to crisply explain the ease of adoption is important in telling the story. And that's certainly true from an ERP perspective, not always an easy thing to implement. Yeah. And then once you've identified the significant market problem, the compelling ROI, and the buyer or user persona and use case, and the ease of adoption, then you're really ready to craft a compelling message focused on inciting action from a buyer, and thereby defeating the status quo. And I think the other thought, just in terms of being able to identify a compelling event, oftentimes in our industry that can help defeat the status quo. So if there's some natural event for a buyer that triggers a need, and then helping to focus on that compelling event, can be an important step. And having the voice of the customer involved in that, can also be really compelling in terms of telling the story, demonstrating the value from a client that has adopted a solution, and doing that in their words or with their voice from a client testimonial can be really powerful.
Yeah, all great ideas. So things I wrote down: inciting buyer action, identifying the compelling event, starting with the market problem, communicating this compelling ROI. These are all, best practices that I think our audience will certainly benefit from. Kind of a follow-up to that question, although we may have already answered it, and if that's the case, that's fine, we can move on, but I just wanted to make sure. What I'm hearing from chief strategy and product officers like you is this focus around creating the why change story. And this term, why change story, is literally almost branded these days. So has your company come up with a why change story? And, what's your general opinion of that overall concept?
Yeah, we're highly relevant for us right now. We're sort of living through a shift in our market right now, and so there is a focus on this from our standpoint. So the most relevant why change story that we're focused on in our business, and this is one of the biggest ones that I've come across in my career, is related to cloud adoption. So in the higher ed ERP space, most clients have on-premise solutions for ERP. And then, so going to your last question on defeating the status quo, there are really some significant market problems and trigger events that people are seeing or experiencing in higher ed right now that can compel movement by clients to move their solution set to the cloud. Some of those include, for us, just to give you some examples, people from an ERP on-premise management standpoint go through hardware refresh cycles or software upgrade cycles. They're struggling with the cost of supporting solutions in-house versus budget pressures, or senior staff retiring, or security concerns, et cetera. It's things like that that our clients are actually bringing to us in terms of the problems that they're facing or the trigger events that they're going through. And I think from our standpoint, we've really taken those in and been able to identify how we're delivering value with both the software and the services that we're providing that can actually, be applicable at some of those trigger points or to some of those events that folks are having to go through. And I think that has really forced us to cycle in on the market problems, the trigger events, and then to be able to really craft stories around both to help with our marketing and our sales teams go through the dialogue with clients on those topics. It really has been we're living through, I think, a shift that's focusing in on the why change and helping us develop that type of story.
Yeah. So for those listening, watching, or if you're reading the transcription of this, really hone in on this why change story. Make sure it's really clear. In Toby's case, this move to the cloud is potentially a once-in-a-career compelling event. And crafting the why change story around that and all the benefits of moving to the cloud is a great opportunity and one not to be missed. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. During the break, I want you to think about these questions that I asked Toby. Do you know the answers? And more importantly, do you like the answers? If not, I think we might be able to help you. Consider having one of our experts spend some time with you in a workshop. To get a feel for what is covered in the workshop, go to sbi.tips/2017 workbook and download a copy of the workbook we use in these sessions. And as it relates to this particular topic, turn to page 143 to 146. You're listening to the SBI podcast, and we'll be right back.
Meet Bruce. He's CMO for a pharma company in the Midwest. Every Saturday morning, he heads to his favorite coffee shop to watch SBI TV.
Dedicated to helping you make your number.
It's how he keeps on top of trends and learns about emerging best practices direct from top marketing leaders.
You don't want to be marching up the hill and look behind and no one is following.
For Bruce, it provides the jolt of inspiration he needs to stay on top of his game. That, along with his venti triple shot half-sweet non-fat soy hazelnut macchiato extra whip. How do you SBI? Take it to the next level with an SBI workshop. Learn more at howdoyousbi.com.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the SBI Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Alexander, and today's guest is Toby Williams, the Chief Product and Strategy Officer at enterprise software maker Ellucian. Today, we are demonstrating how to launch new products successfully. So let's go ahead and jump back into the questions. So, Toby, how can a product leader work with marketing and sales specifically to convince customers of the urgency to move from the status quo?
Yeah, so I'll sort of follow through from some of the other questions, Greg. I mean, we approach this with a tight coupling between product managers, product marketing, and sales enablement, and a really tight coupling with our customer success teams and reference clients. So from a structure standpoint, or from an org structure standpoint, my team at Ellucian is responsible for product management. We have a separate marketing organization which includes product marketing, and as we're building out our messaging and putting together the sort of the why change stories or messaging to defeat the status quo, I mean, the first piece is really to make sure that we have a tight coupling between the teams, and the teams are working together from a very early stage to get full view of what the market problem is that we're trying to solve, and have the chance to craft those stories together. The way we actually operationalize and approach what we've been discussing is that cross-functional collaboration between the teams. It's part of how we actually drive the launch process, making sure that they're all involved with both the solution development, but then also the very early client conversations. So having those folks from a sales enablement or from a product marketing standpoint involved with our alpha and beta clients has been really, really important to us. It's generated, I think, really good feedback from clients and really helped us shape some of the right messaging and some of the right stories to really focus in on the value prop that's being delivered, the market problem that's being solved, and then help us really craft messaging that has resonated well. And partnering early on, I can't stress enough, it's just getting all those teams together and driving the collaboration at an early stage to develop the messaging that will resonate the best.
Yeah. And the thing I wanted to point out to our audience is that in the first segment, we talked about why change. Right now, we're talking about why change now. So it's one thing to compel somebody to think about doing something different, buying a piece of software, changing a process, whatever it is. And it's quite another thing to get them to do it today, which, for those sales leaders that are out there, this is music to their ears because they're all running towards a number, and getting them to change now versus tomorrow is a big deal. So that's a distinction between those two. All right, let me move to my next question, which is a little bit, kind of conceptual or academic. And it's this area of messaging frameworks. So we're seeing increased adoption of these messaging frameworks. Some of them are informal, just kind of, you might have a messaging framework you're using right now and don't even know it because you never really thought to call it that. And in other cases, we see some standard methodologies being adopted, some that come to mind. So a company called Corporate Visions provides a thing called Power Messaging, which seems to be pretty popular. There's The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell that's out there that seems to be pretty popular. At Ellucian, have you guys started going down this path, or is this something that is just kind of a little organic inside your company?
Well, it's probably more on the organic end of the spectrum, or the informal end of the spectrum. I think the two types of frameworks, if you can even call them that we've probably used the most are focusing on problem statement identification, so building messaging around the market problem, the solution, and the associated ROI or use case result for a client. And then storytelling is another, using the client voice to tell the story, both in terms of our institutional clients, but also in terms of the specific personas who use our products. So, using client stories and the actual client voices where we can, again, both in terms of the actual institutions and then also in terms of the people themselves, has been powerful for us. That's been two that have been in use, even if somewhat informal from a framework standpoint at Ellucian over time.
Using the client's voice as a storytelling method, that's interesting. I think the audience might benefit from learning a little bit more about that. In fact, I was going to ask you a question regarding storytelling, and you kind of beat me to it there. So, how do you actually use the client's voice in your stories?
Yes, this has been big for us. I mean, we've used storytelling, and many of those have been focused on getting. So if we go through an implementation with a client, and many of our solutions from an ERP standpoint are focused on delivering, whether it's automation or some other hard measurable ROI from a dollars or from a process standpoint, and being able to work with our clients to have them tell their story of how they implemented a solution or how that solution has helped their institution and demonstrated an ROI that's been measurable for them has been really powerful. And we tend to do that again early on in the cycle from a product development or product launch standpoint to make sure that we have that available to us as we roll products out. So getting client feedback and capturing the stories has been critical. One other thing that we've done is both, as I said, use that from an institutional standpoint, but then also getting the actual personas who use the products has also been powerful for us. Those are focusing on some of the high visibility areas or high visibility personas for our clients, like registrars or VPs of enrollment for us in the higher education market, and really positioning those folks as heroes has really, really resonated well with both our sales teams and our client base overall. So positioning those different personas, like a CIO, for example, as a hero on campus, and giving them the forum, the platform to tell their story and how they've implemented a solution and what result they've produced has really it's really resonated with our market.
Yeah, that's a great example. You talked about injecting these client stories early in the process, and when you described your process a little while back, I'm going to simplify here, but let's just say alpha, beta, early ship. How early do you inject these client stories?
Yeah, I mean, we focus on so referenceability is a big part of our market in higher education, and so the ability to identify client references early on that other potential clients can rely on is a really important part of our launch process and of our overall marketing and sales process. So we literally do start with, for example, our beta clients who would go through our implementation process and start using products and help work with us to give us feedback and help us better the products or the solutions themselves. But as a part of that, we're also hoping that we can get them to a place of referenceability to really help us tell our story. So that's where we really start. And again, referenceability is a really big part of our market. So that's in part why we focus on it so much.
It's a great reminder. I wasn't even going to ask you about referenceability, but it's a great reminder. So audience members, we're talking about product launch right now, developing messaging. There's no better message than a powerful reference. So make sure that when your product team is moving an early customer through beta and general release, that you're capturing these references and you're capturing these client stories. Okay. All right, let's take another short break. Before you come back to the show, head over to Apple's App Store and download the SBI app. Now, why the heck would you want to do that? Well, this allows you to get all of SBI's sales and marketing content, like this show, in a mobile-friendly way. So one more segment. Stick around after the break.
Meet Chuck. He's the head of sales for a business services company. He stays on top of sales and marketing trends by listening to SBI podcasts on his morning commute.
The plan is to understand what your revenue target is.
Except on Tuesdays. That's when he jams out to 80s New Wave. On Wednesday, it's SBI all morning long, with more emerging best practices from the business world.
I'd say the biggest thing you need to avoid is leading without support.
Until Thursday. That's 90s Grunge Day. On Friday, it's back to business. That's when Chuck ends the week on a high note with more hits from SBI.
Sales is really straightforward. You make your number, you don't make your number.
Rock on, Chuck. How do you SBI? Get the most out of your SBI experience. Manage your account at howdoyousbi.com.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is our last segment today with Toby demonstrating how to launch new products. In this segment, I want to reward those of you that have stuck around to the end of the show. God bless you. And I want to try to offer you an action plan, if you will, some kind of immediate takeaway value from today's show. So, Toby, let me give you a hypothetical here. If you were hired by a new company tomorrow and were given a mandate to launch new products, what would you do, in what order, and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if I might draw from some of the prior comments, Greg. I mean, I think approaching it in a very programmatic way is the overall important thing in my mind. Just creating order and programmatically stepping through some pretty key areas is how I would approach it or lay it out. So, the first thing I think is just understanding the market as quickly as possible and understanding the market problems as quickly as possible to make sure that, if you get everything else right from a launch standpoint, that you've actually got a product that will be compelling in the market. And the second piece, while this may be a little bit on the boring end of the spectrum, the actual management of the launch process as a project and the really tight project management that's associated with that, I think, is key from an actual launch execution standpoint. So making sure that whether it's through a formal PMO or with a project director or however you're staffed to do that you have the project management discipline inserted in the launch process. And then, I think also importantly is the cross-functional org readiness that goes along with launching a product. So you've got to make sure, I think at a pretty early point, that you've got all the different functional areas involved that you'll be relying on or have dependencies on in the launch process brought into the fold. We use product success teams, again, to manage that process. So making sure that something like that is stood up to bring all the cross-functional teams into the fold and onto the project, as it were. And then, I think once you've done that, it gives you a clear path and clear line of sight to a way to get their feedback and make sure that the org is moving along in sync. And that you're all set to deliver a solid and productive and successful launch.
It's fantastic. So cross-functional org readiness. Music to my ears, my friend. All right, well, we're running out of time here. So, Toby, that was a great demonstration. It really was, on how to launch new products. And I appreciate you taking the time to allow me to ask some questions and extract some things out of you. So on behalf of the audience, I just want to thank you for contributing to our field and giving back to our field. I think we all got a little smarter today.
Thank you.
All right, and I want to thank the SBI audience for tuning in. You have made us the most popular podcast in this category in 2016, and that's not an easy feat. Thank you so much for your loyalty, and keep those download numbers coming. If you want to learn more about this topic or the other areas we focus on, go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/register and create an account. This allows you to personalize your experience with our content. For instance, you can choose the topics you're interested in and how often you want to learn about them. Okay, that's it for today. As always, until next time, I wish you good luck as you try to make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.